All right, joining us tonight to help provide a post-debate analysis between Cox and Peterson are Derek Brown, chair of the Utah Republican Party, and Jeff Merchant, chair of the Utah Democratic Party. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us here tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rosie.
All right, Jeff and Derek, I want to start with, let's talk about your expectations going into this debate. This is not the first time we've heard these two candidates square off. Anything that surprised you or maybe went the way that you thought? Derek, we'll start with you.
Well, I think it was pretty much what I had expected. I mean, you've seen one of the benefits of having a candidate like Spencer Cox, who really had a tough primary and had a lot of really solid competitors, is that it really kind of honed his skills, his ability to make the case on why Spencer Cox and why he should be, the next governor. And ultimately, I think he's someone who has sort of fought his way through that, made the case, and he's been asked these questions again and again and again. And so ultimately, I didn't see anything that was surprising. I think what it did is it gave those who perhaps haven't seen Spencer Cox a chance to really get a feel for who he is, his personality, and what he's done.
Jeff, what about you?
Yeah, well, I think that there were a couple of surprises for me. I think that the big surprise is that Spencer Cox still seems to think that he's not the incumbent. He's clearly incumbent in this situation, and I think that the big difference here is that the questions and the issues that Chris Peterson was raising are about the current policy and the current governor and the current lieutenant governor. And so I think that the surprise for me was the fact that there wasn't more of an embrace of what was going on right now and an acceptance of the fact that the state has a lot of issues and a lot of problems that need to be solved that haven't been solved over the last 12, 15 years of Republican administration that Spencer Cox has specifically been involved in.
Let's talk about the debate styles between the two candidates. I can't really say what I noticed, but did you guys notice maybe a different approach between the two, or were they pretty similar in their responses? And this time, Jeff, I'll start with you.
They both talked fast. I think they were both excited. I think that they were both engaged. Look, I mean, no one can say that either Chris Peterson or Spencer Cox are not gentlemen and genuinely nice guys. And I think that really came out today. They were quite respectful and, they got a little excited, talked a little fast a few times, but I think that that's both kind of their style anyway. And I really didn't see a whole lot of difference between the two of them in terms of the actual style that they were debating in.
Derek, what did you think?
No, I think it's what we've sort of come to expect. And I love the fact that we have two candidates who talked about being friends and getting to know each other in the process of the debate. I think it's a very different approach than what we're likely to see in the national debate tonight. We're seeing two people who genuinely are good friends. And I think that's sort of a Utah model. I mean, we have Jeff Merchant, who's the chair of the Democrat Party, and myself. We disagree on policy, and yet we're friends. And I would expect that our candidates as well would do exactly the same thing. And even when Spencer Cox had a lot of sort of, criticism leveled at him by his Republican opponents, one of the reasons that he won, frankly, is he was able to stay above that and stay positive and talk about issues. And I think that's ultimately what we saw tonight, are two candidates talking about the issues.
I want to talk about this mask mandate, right? They asked this question again, and this time the moderator was like, answer the question. Like, if you had the authority to do so, would you implement a mask mandate on the entire state right now? Based on the answers that they gave, what are your guys' thoughts? Derek, I'll start with you.
Well, I think what it did is it showed that you have someone, our lieutenant governor, who has basically been at the head of the COVID task force from the time this started. And this showed, I think, an understanding of the issues and the complexities, because there's a lot of sort of black and white in this, and you hear both sides, and each side sort of argues their side as if there isn't another side. And the phrase that Spencer Cox used was threading the needle. And that's what I want to hear. I want to hear a legislator and an executive and someone who's in elected office understand that there's some ambiguity, there's some difficulty, there's challenges with taking a one-size-fits-all approach. And so I think the fact that we didn't see that showcased his experience on that issue.
Jeff, what do you think?
So, Rosie, let me just be frank. I hate wearing a mask. I don't like it. I live in Salt Lake, in Salt Lake County, and I wear it wherever I go. And I just don't know how hard it is for us to be able to just say we wear a mask. And I think that that's kind of where Chris Peterson was coming from. Now look, I get, and I think that Spencer Cox and Chris Peterson get, that there are some areas where maybe that's not necessary. But we're looking at a situation where we now have a patchwork across the state of people or communities where you can wear a mask and where you don't have to wear a mask and where you should wear a mask and where you have to. And I think that really the issue here is coming up with a standardized approach, particularly in areas where the virus is spreading. I mean, we have a 7-day average of over 1,000. I think that means it's time to do something, especially when only a few weeks ago we were at 300.
I think this is a good place for us to put a tack into the conversation. Hold that thought. We have to take a quick break, but when we return, we continue our post-debate analysis between gubernatorial candidate Spencer Cox and Chris Peterson. In focus tonight, the two major party candidates in the race for Utah's governor squared off on the debate stage. Republican nominee and current Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox and Democrat nominee Chris Peterson. The major topics from tonight's debate range from the state's pandemic response to economic recovery. We pick up right where we left off with Derek Brown, chair of the Utah Republican Party, and Jeff Merchant, chair of the Utah Democratic Party. I want to pull little snippets from tonight's debate and then bring you guys in for an analysis. Tonight, Lieutenant Governor Cox, he defended his role as the head of the governor's coronavirus task force, pointing to the comparatively low unemployment. Let's take a listen.
We brought together and are still working over 250 individuals every day, the best and brightest in the state, medical professionals, emergency response team that are coming together and making recommendations to the governor who then makes those decisions. That's what's best about Utah, and that's exactly what we're doing. And it shows in our successes, Doug. The best economy in the country during a pandemic with unemployment at 4.1% and one of the lowest mortality rates in the country at 0.6%. Now, again, it hasn't been perfect. We have a long way to go, but we are working together to find those solutions.
All right, Derek, Jeff, this is obviously a very divisive topic, and people have different interpretations on whether or not the state's response is enough. What do you guys think based on what Cox said in tonight's debate? Jeff, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think that the task force could probably have done a little bit better job. Of course, Utah is in a better state than a lot, though. If you look at the numbers, we are one of the fastest increasing states with COVID-19 spreading fairly quickly. And I think that part of the issue, and the issue that most people I think have had, is the fact that the sole emphasis on economics has eclipsed some of the other important issues, including that this disease is something that is particularly affecting minority communities and particularly affecting working families who have a hard time being able to both stay at home with their kids at school, who are being taught at school at home or are sick, and being able to work. So, I don't disagree that we're doing okay, but I think that we could have done a whole lot better, and we could have been much more proactive over the course of the last 6 months.
Derek, let's hear from you.
Well, I think one of the difficulties that the Democrat had in this debate was trying to find something legitimately to criticize when, as your state, as Spencer Cox mentioned, the last report showed us with the lowest unemployment in the nation. In terms of mortality rates, in terms of the way we handled it. We have done incredibly well. And you have to remember, we've now had 6 months to kind of look back, and there's a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking going on and what could or couldn't have been done. And in hindsight, compared to what other states have done, we've done an amazing job, and the state is succeeding. Our economics are succeeding. We have people coming here simply because we're doing so well. And the person at the head of that was Spencer Cox. And so I think ultimately this is something that one of the things I like is that he's willing to look back and say, that's something we could have done better. That's something we made a mistake on. Maybe we should have done it a different way. And I love that we have a candidate like Spencer Cox who's willing to acknowledge some of the errors and move forward and learn and move into the future. But I think that ultimately we're doing great as a state, and so it makes it hard to criticize.
Yeah,
the numbers don't lie, right, Derek? We're now over 1,000 people. I think we were a little bit lower today, but the numbers don't lie, and we still do have a long, long way to go. And
Wait,
at
Jeff,
least for
Jeff,
me,
hold
I'm
on.
not
hold,
seeing
hold
differences.
that thought real quick. While we're talking about numbers, we have a little soundbite from Chris Peterson that talks about the numbers real quick. Let's play it, and then we'll pick up this conversation right now. Let's hear from it real quick.
It was clear to me that our coronavirus response was careening off track. And in fact, it did careen off track. We are now the 4th worst in the country for coronavirus infections. And that's having consequences not just for people's health, but also for businesses, for jobs. You know, people face long-term lung scarring in their lungs, kidney damage, heart damage, even brain damage associated with this dangerous disease. That's why we've got to do more, and we need to be listening to the public health experts at the Department of Health to get us through this crisis in the best way possible.
All right, Jeff, so now that we've heard that, it kind of ties in to what you wanted to bring up. Go ahead and pick up where you left off.
Yeah, I think it suffices to say that, you know, the numbers don't lie, and, you know, we aren't listening to our health experts. I think that if we were, we would all be wearing masks right now. I think that communities like, you know, when we saw what happened in Corner Canyon, where Jordan School District decided, or where Canyon School District decided, you know, not to listen to the health department's recommendation and decided to keep schools open. You know, these are indicators that we need more direction from the people at the top, and instead of getting that, they're taking the easy path, which is saying it's not our problem, everybody else can handle that on their own, and I just don't think that that suffices right now.
Derek, would you like to respond?
Absolutely. Well, the numbers don't lie, and if you look at the numbers of how we're doing as a state, clearly we are doing well. There is something that we're doing right. I mean, when you look at mortality rates, as Spencer Cox mentioned, when you look at the economy, when you look at the balancing, we've got to look at all those issues. We also have to look at issues such as how the virus is impacting other areas of our society. And so, you know, we can pick and choose which numbers we like most, but ultimately I think it's important that we look sort of overall at the health of our society, of our state, look at the number of people who are still coming here, and the fact that I have people that I know from all over the country that are calling me saying, man, I wish I were there in Utah. We're clearly doing something right, and the person who is heading what's going on and what's being done right is the individual who was debating tonight.
Guys, time flies by so fast with you guys. We've got about 1 minute left. In your opinion, who won tonight's debate? Derek, I'll start with you.
Well, I loved hearing, first of all, the civility that went on. I was also, you asked me earlier, sort of any surprises. I loved hearing a Democrat say, and the phrase was, and I wrote it down because it was so interesting, he said we need to keep taxes low and have a light touch on regulation. As a Republican, that warms my heart. I love to hear that. And I think Spencer Cox certainly showed the depth of experience that he has, not just heading the COVID task force, but as lieutenant governor, and I think that'll be reflected in the November election. All
right, Jeff, final word for you. Who
Well,
won the debate, in your opinion?
Yeah, it sounds like what Derek is saying is that Chris Peterson won, right? Right, Derek? So
I think I missed that. Did I say that? Let's rewind here, 1 second.
No, look, I mean, they both did a fantastic job. Of course, you know, I mean, Chris Peterson is a great individual, a whip-smart man, and has done so much for the people of this state and, frankly, for the people of this country. And, you know, I'd love to see him continue to move up in the polls and continue to do well. Spencer Cox, we could do a lot worse than Spencer Cox, too. So they both did a great job.
Jeff and Derek, the time just flew by with you guys. I had so much fun. Thank you for joining us tonight on the CW30 News for your post-debate analysis.
Thanks, Rosie.
Thank you.